Robocop vs. the Terminator is a Sega Genesis classic. I'm a huge fan of the game. I have figures where Robocop is blue and Arnold has the red and purple colors. So cool. There's also a Super Nintendo version, and we'll talk about that, but the game I grew up with was the version on Sega Genesis and Master System, and it's a rip-roaring good time. It's also brutally difficult, full of cheating enemies, insta-death hazards, and so many moments where the game screws you out of a crucial item drop. It's a classic 16-bit side-scroller, so none of that should really surprise you, I guess. The game's premise is an interesting one. The scientists behind Skynet, the superintelligence of the Terminator movies, use Robocop's engineering to build it, since he's the only successful linking of a human mind and computer. But it quickly stops making sense as Terminators from the future are sent into the past to stop the human resistance, but also lure Robocop into fighting Ed 209 in the OCP building, which then leads to Robocop uploading himself into the computer, giving Skynet the technology it needs. In the very next paragraph, Robocop is being brought back online in the future to fight through a Terminator outpost, making his way to the inner sanctum of Skynet to save humanity. Wow, that's incredibly rushed. It's the entire game's events, all in the opening text crawl. Seriously, that's everything that happens. After fighting your way through a few locations, you fight Ed 209 at OCP, and suddenly you're in the future fighting Terminators, going after Skynet. It makes no sense, and you'd have no idea what happened if you didn't read the intro. The Super Nintendo version is far, far better in its storytelling. These games are based on the Frank Miller comic of the same name, with the Genesis version completely ignoring most of it, only taking a few of the basic concepts and running with them. The SNES version has fun comic book style story panels, and actually uses the characters that Robocop interacts with in Frank Miller's comic. A woman named Florence that goes back in time to stop Robocop, blaming him for the apocalypse. You see the events of him hooking up to the computer system at OCP, his mind taken prisoner, watching decades of the robot apocalypse unfold before his eyes. Instead of just being brought back online by some unnamed force in the future, in the SNES version, just like the comic, Alex Murphy eventually finds a way to use his mental link to the machine system to build himself a new body from factory parts and cloned flesh, and he goes after Skynet. It's all really fun stuff, and it's a shame that it's all relegated to an opening crawl in the Genesis port, cutting a lot of the story with there being no characters other than Robocop himself. So yeah, points to the NES version for storytelling. It also has more animations going on, and fun enemy behaviors like Terminators climbing up ladders to chase you, when they just stand around in the Genesis version. It has cool moments of environmental storytelling, like the future soldier Florence running around in the background and shooting into the foreground as she tries to assassinate you, as well as more robotic enemy variety, though far less human variety. The levels are way more detailed and just more interesting visually. In many ways, the SNES version wins. But while the Genesis port is clearly lacking in these areas, it more than makes up for it in its superior gameplay feel, music, sound effects, and violence. Just listen to the difference in the opening title screen. Pathetic, I know. Now listen to the two theme songs.
Terminator.
Now check out the sound effects. And of course, the most important difference, the gore. As a kid, Robocop Vs Terminator on the Genesis was the goriest piece of media I was regularly exposed to, only next to Mortal Kombat 2. Every enemy explodes and melts, the splattering sound effect is just the icing on the cake. And seeing the SNES version have no blood, it just goes against everything Robocop stands for. I don't care what other areas it may excel in, no blood versus splattering gore effects, I'm going with the gore effects. And really, the Genesis version just feels way better to play. While Robocop is of course slow, there's a freedom to his movement that makes the game really smooth. We're talking full air control, making platforming and especially projectile dodging way better. He doesn't feel so clunky when he moves, and the jumping is fast and intuitive. Overall, the gameplay has a snappier feel to it, and it just moves along quicker. Honestly, after going back and playing the Genesis version and then loading up the SNES version right after, it felt so bad. I don't even want to try to pass the first level, largely because the respawn system is non-existent. Genesis has you continuing where you died. Nintendo restarts the whole level. Nope, no thank you. In a perfect world, we would combine the SNES's story, boss design, and level detail with the Genesis controls, gore, speed, music, and respawn system. So I never beat Robocop vs Terminator as a kid, but I made it to the boss several times. I also didn't own the game, but the manager of my local Blockbuster must have had a cushy retirement just based on my rentals alone. It's been so many years since I played this game, and now that I've covered the movie trilogy, the new game, and the 2001 Canadian miniseries Prime Directives, I've had the itch to revisit this classic and see how it holds up. And I gotta say, Robo immediately feels great to control. He's not flying around like Sonic or Strider because he's a heavy robot. But the appropriate liberties have been taken, like allowing him to jump, and they've found a really nice compromise between responsive free movement and slow, weighty physics. Oh, and he just flies up ladders, it's pretty funny. But it really works for the gameplay due to how many projectiles you're constantly avoiding. As for what's happening in level 1, no in-game context is given at all for the condition of Detroit. Hundreds of criminals are just standing around ready to shoot Robocop, and there are hostages sitting around. Hostages? What do these street criminals need with hostages? What are their goals? Doesn't matter, just shoot everybody. Rescuing the hostages requires you only to touch them, just like in Moonwalker, where Michael Jackson just needs to touch the children, so you can actually free them by jumping and making contact with your head, and that's pretty convenient. And I guess this is a good moment to talk about the point system. Killing enemies, rescuing hostages, even destroying many objects grants you points, and every 10,000 points you get an extra life. Freeing hostages also refills your health to 100%, making them incredibly valuable. Though I wish there was some kind of point bonus for finding all the hostages in a level, instead of just the measly 100 points you get for saving them, which is the same amount you get for killing a regular bad guy. 50 points for most objects, 100 for dudes, 150 for dudes in windows and turrets, 200 for Terminators, and the most rewarding enemies to kill are the red Terminators, annoying bastards that have to be knocked down 4 times before they die, giving you a whopping 500 points. You also get 500 for shooting stationary mines, or the ones spawned by giant robots. Exploration is incentivized through health pickups and weapons of course, but more importantly extra lives, the spinning Robocop heads. There is unfortunately no point bonus for picking up a health item while at max health, which would have been really nice. Also, credit to the Genesis version for making health items baby food, like in the movie, instead of lame armor shards.
Tastes like baby food. Knock yourself out.
Robocop vs Terminator is 100% classic 90s design. You have a limited number of lives, and when you lose them all, you restart the level after using one of your limited continues, giving you another 5 lives. If you use up all your continues, the game is over. There are no hard saves or quick saves, no checkpoints. It doesn't even give you level passwords to start later in the game and practice other levels. It's back to the beginning for you every time. A big pacing difference between the Genesis and the SNES version is that the Genesis version only has one Terminator in the modern day section. You fight one T-800 on level 2, followed by Kane from Robocop 2 on level 3, some kind of army tank thing on level 4, and the big showdown with Ed 209 at OCP headquarters in level 5. Then the second half of the game is focused on the future and the Terminator army. I like this better than the more comic book faithful SNES version, introducing Ed 209 early on and getting straight to the Terminators by level 2 and never going back. The Genesis version really plays into the gore aspect by having about a third of the game to half the game taking place in modern times, so you can mutilate hundreds of dudes before the game shifts to bloodless fights against Terminators. They're all basic street punks, color-swapped guys in sunglasses, guys holding long-barreled cannons, construction workers hanging from cables that are trying to kill you for some reason, big muscle dudes with machine guns. They all die the same, in a shower of blood and screams. This is far more enjoyable than just basically 3 short bloodless levels with barely any enemies in them, the vast majority being ladies for some reason. I never thought I'd see Robocop mowing down waves of women in the street, but here we are. So you're shooting guys, dodging projectiles, which can be difficult since you're such a large target, and passing through different environments. It's a simple game, there's not a lot to say about what you do level to level. Each place feels unique, not just aesthetically, but in traversal. The streets feature a lot of climbing up buildings, the construction yard has hanging chains that you use to cross gaps and explore for secrets, OCP headquarters has you going room to room through doorways and staying above enemies with optional rails, the Terminator outpost has a lot of platforms and hidden off-path areas and fire traps, the Skynet facilities have laser hazards and mine traps. These variations in level design shake up the gameplay just enough to make it feel not too repetitive, even for such a simple 30-year-old game. Weapon variety is really good in Robocop vs Terminator. The starting pistol has infinite ammo, so obviously I used that and only that for the entire game. Nah, I'm just kidding. What's up, Ultra Kill players? I hope you had a lovely new year. The pistol is absolute garbage, which is a real shame, considering it's the weapon of the movies and one of the most iconic weapons in cinema. I don't need it to be super powerful, but it sucks that nearly every other gun feels good and has interesting uses except the pistol. It's just the default shitty gun you end up with when you lose all your other weapons. All weapons are infinite ammo, but dying with a weapon in your hand causes you to lose it, and it's replaced with the pistol. You have 2 weapon slots, so if you're gonna die and you don't want to lose the weapon in your hands, switch real quick so you lose the other one. You can actually make the switch right after dying to choose the weapon you want to lose. Awesome mechanic. This was a very useful strategy against bosses where I would switch back to the pistol every time I died, so I could continue using something powerful. Because you don't want to fight bosses with the pistol, it's miserable. Let's talk about the weapons, and what makes them special. The flamethrower is a spread gun that eats enemy projectiles, greatly helping you deal with spam and fast-moving aerial enemies. The homing missiles let you breeze through a lot of areas just spamming the fire button, but it does low damage against bosses, and can cause you to accidentally trigger items not in the room, which are gone by the time you get there. More on that later. Rockets are short-range explosives that do massive damage, highest damaging weapon in the game, great weapon to keep on you for early bosses. Just look how fast Kane is taken down with this thing. The grenade launcher is one of the most bizarre weapons I've ever seen. Like rockets, they're very high damage, but they're slow-moving and actually move in the direction you press. You can shoot them straight and then raise or lower to target turrets, and you can create a wall of destruction in front of you that annihilates everything. It's amazing, it's absurd. It's just a hard gun to use in an emergency because it's awkward and the grenades are slow. Ed 209's arm is another high damaging weapon that's very straightforward in its use, and it's mostly satisfying for the sound it makes and the fact that you're holding fucking Ed 209's arm. The laser pistol is kinda crap. Better than the base pistol, but not great. Let me know if I'm missing something here. And finally, there's the plasma rifle, which is just so good. Instantly vaporizes Terminators, making it one of, if not the best weapon in the game. It also does really good damage against the Terminator bosses, taking them out in less than 15 seconds. Going into boss fights with a good weapon is essential, because it can be tricky to learn how to dodge all their projectiles and not lose a bunch of lives in the process. Because unlike the Super Nintendo version, the Genesis version has no invincibility frames when you take damage. See here how Robocop flashes red for a moment after getting hit? No such generosity to be found in the Genesis version. Every single bullet will hit you, and you'll be dead in seconds. And if your hurt box comes into contact with an enemy, your life will drain to 0 faster than your mom dropping her panties at the bar after a couple beers. Your mom dropping her panties at the bar.
Mate, Mayo, please just stop. Let me do it. And if your hurt box comes into contact with an enemy, your life will drain to 0 faster than your mum drops her panties at the bar after a couple of beers. That's how you do it.
Thanks, G-Man. You're so much better at this than me.
No, that's alright, mate. Just, try not to piss off any more fan bases, okay?
We'll see. It's a new year. If it's your first time playing and you think you're just gonna find the best gun for the level and march your way to the end, you are greatly mistaken. You will lose your good weapons, and you'll end up with a pistol in both hands in the later levels, and you might as well just turn the game off at that point because you're not gonna make it. The game has really dirty ways of taking your guns from you. If you pick up a new weapon, it replaces the gun you have in the other slot, which takes a while to get used to. It's counterintuitive. You would think it would replace what you're holding, but no. The game also occasionally spawns weapons from turrets or environmental objects on the ceiling, meaning a new weapon will just fall on you, replacing one of the weapons you were holding on to. Sometimes you'll jump down a long vertical section, fearing a death pit, only to suffer a much worse fate, landing on a weapon you didn't want. Man, on this channel I like to talk about how games incentivize creative playstyles and the use of weapon variety, and, well, I guess this is one way to do it. Just rob the players of the guns they were using, and now they gotta use something else. I mean, it works. It definitely got me to use everything as I was playing. Now that I'm better, I'm able to hold on to the weapons I want for different situations, for the most part, utilizing their unique abilities when I need them, instead of just randomly ending up with something I didn't want to be using. The fact that the game cheaply takes away your weapons definitely adds to the difficulty at times, as do 4 other really annoying features. First, sometimes projectiles or even enemies themselves will just pass through the floor. And hey, I can do that too, motherfucker, and I don't feel bad about it one bit. Second, Terminators regain their health if they go off screen after you damage them. You gotta kill them now, because if you run away, the fight starts over, and you'll just be shooting the same Terminator in a loop. Third, occasionally, enemies will just spawn in right next to you, leading to essentially unavoidable damage. And fourth, most infuriating, items will disappear if they go off screen. I can't tell you how many times I've missed a life-saving health pickup or a much-needed weapon just because I needed to run away from some bullets before I could go get it. Or I trigger a pickup to fall, and it falls down a ways and I go down to get it and it's just gone. This is single-handedly the most bullshit aspect of this game, and I hope to God it's just a bug and they didn't actually intend for it to be this way. Oh, and I don't know where else to mention this, but sometimes bosses bug out and they just never die. I don't know what triggers it. All that being said, playing this game on normal for my first attempt, I started to feel quite comfortable in the first half. The first 2/3 really. I was racking up extra lives, I hadn't used any continues. I was thinking, hey, this isn't so bad. It's a lot easier than I remember. How did I never beat this game? And then it pulls the oldest trick in the book: sudden massive spike in difficulty. Here, this level right here, the projectile dodging turns into madness. I went from 12 lives to 1 by the end of it. And I wasn't aware of it at the time, but that basically means I'm screwed. I was simply not good enough yet to make it through the final levels with enough lives to take on the final boss. That's how these old school limited continues games are. They may feel like easy spamming button mashers in the early levels, but once you get further in and die, starting the game over, you realize that the real challenge is to actually learn to play the opening levels as efficiently as possible, maxing out your points and getting as many lives as you can, to take them into the end. That's the kind of magic you find in good beat-em-ups like Streets of Rage or Final Vendetta. And when you master the mechanics needed to dominate the early levels, that's when you fall in love with the gameplay. If you just had infinite continues and could mash and spam all the way to the end, you would never learn how to play. That's why arcade mode limited continue design is so great. It makes you play well if you want to progress, and playing well is playing fun. Challenge matters. You fight the core of Skynet, which is of course a giant floating Terminator head that spawns drones and spits missiles at you while Terminators come at you from either side of the screen. It's a barrage of bullshit and there's no way you're gonna win this. Suddenly I remembered why I never beat this as a kid. So I decided to dedicate the next few days to mastering this game. I will finally beat Robocop Vs Terminator. By cheating. Yes, I'm playing on an emulator and I was using save states. I would die and reload constantly in the final levels, trying to save as many lives as possible and keep the good weapons. Because if you're left with only pistols in the final levels, you're dead. They are far less generous when it comes to weapon pickups, most of them being hidden away in secret areas. So I beat the game using save states, but of course I didn't feel good about it. I simply wanted to learn the levels more and go into a real attempt better prepared. And wait, secret levels? There's secret levels? Sure enough, if you jump to the left at this part of level 1, you get a secret developer room that gives you 11 extra lives, and there are 4 other secret levels that all have combat and a few more extra lives to find. I guess the first one being so oddly hidden makes it count more as a cheat room, and when I beat the game, I did it with 7 lives remaining. I didn't feel good about it. That cheat room with 11 extra lives essentially made this victory possible, and I'll admit I used a few save states, on like 3 occasions when I was nervous about something. Come on, it's not so bad, it's not so bad. I know, it's unacceptable. I can do this legitimately. Time to man up. Let's do this, but let's do it on the hard difficulty. Killer. I'm not sure of everything that killer difficulty changes, but I do know that it starts you with fewer lives, the flashing arrows that tell you where to go are gone, and you take a little more damage. The first enemy kills you in 8 shots on normal and 7 shots on killer. And you know what? I did it. First try, beating it with 26 lives to spare. I uploaded the run on my second channel, Residual Mayo, if you want to see it. A lot of this game comes down to having the right weapon to deal with the situation, learning to dodge, at times, unpredictable patterns of projectiles, and above all, patience. If you just charge forward, you will die in seconds. You gotta take every step with fear and respect for your foes. Some of them explode in a flurry of projectiles, making things even worse. Many encounters involve you killing 1 or 2 guys, walking back, and avoiding their gunfire before inching forward again. If you play like that, you're much more likely to survive. Bosses tend to target you wherever you are on screen, so you'll be doing a lot of dodging in between shots. You gotta get good at super jumping and then curving in the air. Get that down and you're gold. The final boss, I don't really have a strategy. I just focus him down with rockets or plasma, and I try not to panic as an onslaught of crap is sent my way. I die a lot, but that's why it's important to get here with 20 extra lives. The credits roll as the Skynet boss dies, and it says that history has been altered and a new time-space matrix has been formed, saving the human race from destruction. What? How? Does the SNES version explain this better? Wow, that's a much cooler looking final boss, I gotta say. The Super Nintendo version really does have a lot more going on. If only it didn't sound and feel like ass. So in this version, you initiate a self-destruct sequence after taking down the Skynet core, and there's a short cinematic where the facility explodes and Robocop walks dramatically silhouetted against the destruction. He vows to rebuild the world he has helped destroy, and from the ashes of destruction a new world will form. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. No random silly resetting of history and creating new time-space matrices or whatever. Just Robocop holding up a Terminator skull like a badass and vowing to help rebuild humanity. Much better ending. It is, however, not the ending of Frank Miller's comic, which has Robocop sending himself into the past right before Skynet explodes, and he does some stuff that prevents Judgment Day from happening. So in that way, the Genesis port's ending is actually closer to the comic, but it's just crammed into an ending text crawl with no context. After finishing this game, I can safely say that it is one of the higher tier 16-bit side-scrollers of the 90s. In no way is this a cash grab capitalizing on popular IPs. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's creative, the music and violence is great, it's fun to master. I don't think I would put it in the highest tier of games from that time because of certain infuriating aspects about it. It's not on the level of something like Super Mario World, but it's a respectable, fun time that deserves to be played and remembered. Thank you for watching my video. Remember to like and subscribe, share with a friend. Stay tuned for my video on the Robocop 2014 remake, that's going to be a lot of fun. And check out some more Robocop videos here on the channel. Bye!